Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back for another Southwest Virginia fishing report with Matt Reilly. How's it going, Matt?
Pretty good, Marvin. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. It's not as hot as it used to be, and it's drying out, but I hear we're going to get a lot of rain here in the next few days.
Yeah, that's the way it's looking. I think it was last overnight Thursday of I guess it was the week of this last week. You know, we were back in the 50s overnight and low to mid 60s during the day, and things got a little weird for a little while. And we've been, the trout streams have been getting pretty dang low. The New's been pretty average, but looks like the New River drainage, the upper end of the drainage in North Carolina is supposed to get like 4.5 inches of rain in the next week. And locally here, we're supposed to get about 3.5. So, not really sure what's going to happen, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be dealing with some high water, end of this week and next week.
Yeah.
Maybe longer than that.
Yeah, and so folks, we're recording this on June the 4th, so I guess, people that are kind of coming into the upcoming weekend and afterwards, you want to let's talk a little bit about, fishing for trout and smallmouth bass as the water starts to come up, and then there's probably going to be a period of time where we're not going to be able to get out, and then kind of how to fish for them when the water drops.
Yeah. So typically, you have a couple different things that you're dealing with high water. It's both dirty water and just fast water. It's not particularly cold this time of year, so that's good. There's nothing worse than cold, dirty, high water, but dirty and high water you can deal with pretty easily, particularly with the trout streams. They'll run out a lot faster, and you can always, both with the bigger systems, the smallmouth rivers, and the sort of secondary and primary mountain streams, you can always just go up higher in the drainage, and you're going to find your lowest and clearest water up there generally. So that's something that I'll do, is just kind of start hopping around and hitting some spots way up high. But in terms of current, fish are typically going to push to the banks. They're looking for areas out of current, and that applies to both trout and smallmouth. You're looking for sort of pockets along the bank, and they will go, particularly trout, they'll go deep and sit on the bottom, beneath a big shallow riffle, beneath the drop off, so there won't be much current down there. In dirtier water, generally, I'm fishing a little bit bigger than in terms of smallmouth than I typically would, and generally darker colors. So, black and purple, black and blue, dark olives, that kind of thing. And generally fishing a little bit slower and a little bit closer to the bottom. They've done one of the studies I like to cite a lot. It's one they did up in Minnesota several years ago, where they basically analyzed stomach contents of smallmouth before and after high water events, which were also, times of bad clarity. And beforehand, they were finding them, they were consuming sort of equal parts bait fish and crayfish and other bottom-dwelling species and foodstuffs. And then after that high water event, and the water was dirty, they're eating primarily on the bottom. And I imagine that has a lot to do with the fact that they just can escape the current better down there, and they have something to relate to versus kind of hanging in rather open water. So that's something that I'll do. But, fish, I think fish can see pretty well and that kind of stuff, as long as there's not too much debris. You just want to do your part to try to put some contrast in your offering. Like I said, fish a darker and maybe a little bit bigger fly.
Yeah, got it. And in terms of, as the water starts to come up, do the trout and the smallmouth trying to kind of boogie and get on structure and get down and then stay there, or are they a little bit opportunistic and then they basically get locked down for a while and then they put the feedback on once the current starts to drop.
Yeah. I hear different things, and personally, I just like to fish when I can fish instead of really targeting certain times. You'll notice patterns, but I've done really well trout fishing generally right after the sort of after the peak, when the water's kind of dropping back down, and that's in the mountain streams anyway. I think they do, sometimes as it's rising, they'll eat because there's more food being washed around. You get stronger currents, so more food's being dislodged from the cobble, and it's more food in the drift. But like I said, I've usually done better sort of after we've gotten that peak flow and it's starting to come back down. With the smallmouth, I would generally say that when that they will feed a little bit better when the water's up. Definitely not any worse, but as far as when the water's coming back down, generally, as long as the water's still a little bit, above average, you're going to find a fairly tight structure and that kind of thing, just because, like I said, the current speed is a little more than typical and more than they want to work to stay in. As it drops and gets back to average and low, they'll pull out a little bit, and particularly as it starts to get low, or if it drops rapidly, they'll pull off and be a little bit more, I guess that they'll float a little bit more. You'll find them in sort of off secondary shelves and that kind of thing. But generally, like I said, high water, you're looking at the bank. And even though you might have some softer pieces of water in the mid-river, it's not really connected to other habitat, because you've got a raging river between that and the bank. So I'm typically on the bank.
Got it. Well, that's super helpful. And folks, if you have a question for Matt, if you'll send it to us on the Facebook page or through the website for the Articulate Fly, we'll read it. And if we read your question, I'll send you some Articulate Fly swag. And at the end of the season, we're going to have a drawing, and Matt will hook up the lucky winner with some flies and I believe some coupons for Reilly rods.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Well, I know we always want to talk to you about what you got coming out on the press. What's your upcoming Rural Virginian article we need to be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so the Rural Virginian, let's see. So we just had sort of an interesting, there's a couple of things. One of them, I wrote a couple of weeks back about our Department of Game and Inland Fisheries director retiring, and we just got a new one elected, and he's actually from my hometown and from Fluvanna County, so that's going to be a pretty, I think, interesting article for people in Central Virginia. And then we also just had another snakehead find in Northern Virginia. This time it was out of Lake Frederick, which is the first snakehead to be found in the Shenandoah River drainage west of the Blue Ridge. So kind of some big news there. Nothing super. I try not to sensationalize the snakehead stuff, but it is kind of big to find one in a different river drainage.
Well, very cool. I'll put links to those in the show notes. And before I let you go, why don't you let folks know where they can find you so they can book you this summer and chase some smallmouth?
Yeah, the website is best, and that's MattReillyFlyFishing.com, and all the social media and all that is linked on there as well.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it, Matt. Folks, get out and fish if you can, but be careful in the high water. Tight lines, everybody. Thanks again, Matt.
All right. Thanks, Marvin.